The views and opinions expressed by the hosts of this podcast are those of the individual and not of any affiliated companies. Occasional adult language is used.
Welcome to the ShamTalk podcast, the #1 Notre Dame athletics podcast in the world. Today, the guys talk about the team's trip to the Sun Bowl and what that means for the program. They also discuss the latest influx of talent at the wide receiver position and how the program is winning the transfer portal. The show closes with the guys giving their views on the college football playoff and what the committee's decisions could mean for Notre Dame. And now, from the Duncan Student Center, here's your host, Jake Miller.
And welcome to our ShamTalk podcast tonight. Along with Brett McLaughlin, I'm Jake Miller. Welcome back. It's been a while. We finally have some stuff to talk about tonight.
Oh, yeah.
Should be a good one today. We're going to talk a little bit Notre Dame, the bowl game, Sun Bowl, how they got there, why they're playing in that, what it means, and what the team's goals from it should be. Talk a little bit more about what the team's going to look like next year. They have an interesting matchup to start the season in College Station, but what is that team even going to look like? Is it going to look anything like this year? And then we'll broaden out a little bit and talk about how this crazy last year of the 4-team college football playoff played out. How might it affect Notre Dame? We'll talk through some theoreticals on maybe if Notre Dame was a little bit better in this case and go from there. But happy post-college football playoff to you. Was it an exciting, did you watch it live?
I did watch it live, and I don't know if I was, I'll save the emotions for later for what I was feeling, but it was certainly an event. It was a spectacle to behold. And I, scrolling through Instagram and Twitter and checking out just the live reactions that people had in the wake of it all. It was quite the eventful Sunday.
ESPN took their time to announce the teams. They really, it took 25 minutes to get into the teams, but hey, it took longer for Notre Dame to announce its destination. I think we're waiting until 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, I don't remember exactly when, and it gets dropped that Notre Dame is heading to El Paso, Texas. That's right, El Paso, Texas to the Sun Bowl. Almost in New Mexico, really almost in Mexico, right across the border. Hey, Observer will be there, NDTV will be there, I'm going down. It'll be an interesting game for the Irish. It's an interesting town. The last time the Irish played there, I believe, was in 2010. So it's been a while, been 13 years since they made an appearance, but not their first time. But it's an odd bowl for them to play in. Most people were predicting that the Irish would never fall to the Sun Bowl and that really, there were two options, to go to the Pop-Tarts Bowl in Orlando on the 27th or to play in the ReliaQuest Bowl in Tampa Bay in New Year's. Well, with Georgia out of the playoff, that couldn't happen, or at least the ReliaQuest couldn't. Pop-Tarts still an option, but then, our good friends, Jim Phillips, PhD at the ACC, said, yeah, Notre Dame is not eligible for our top 3 bowls out of the New Year's 6, and that's where we fall. So after that, a little bit of a story. Phillips says Notre Dame is not in the top 3 outside of the New Year's 6. He says that instead, that was Louisville, Clemson, and North Carolina State. Lost to 2 of those teams. Obviously, we beat North Carolina State early on. So after that, Notre Dame essentially had a random choice. The ACC's attorney pulled straws from a hat between the Pinstripe Bowl in New York City, Duke's Mayo Bowl in Charlotte, and the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl in El Paso, and we picked the Sun Bowl. So you might be able to blame the ACC here. There are some other reasons. ACC didn't want certain teams to go back into bowl games that they had already been played in recently and some things like that. And they wanted to help their own programs out. But, Brett, Notre Dame ended up in not a good game. They're playing a very, very depleted Oregon State team that, while ranked, is missing its first-string quarterback, its second-string quarterback. It's missing its running back who just got suspended. Jonathan Smith just went to Michigan State. What is this game
as well? Yeah.
What does this game mean? I mean, is it a glorified scrimmage for Notre Dame? Is it a game that Freeman should be trying to win to get to 10? I mean, what is the Irish? What are they looking for here?
I mean, Freeman should be trying to win this game. Any game you play to win. So that's the first thing that I would say there is that this is absolutely a game that the Irish are going to try to win. Obviously, it's not ideal. As a New York native, I would have preferred to be in the Pinstripe Bowl, but I can understand the ACC not wanting to give Notre Dame one of their top bowls. We don't need the spotlight. A team like NC State rarely ever gets the spotlight.
They do, rarely ever get it.
It would be nice for, to spread the love, I guess. And again, we're not a full member, so there is that sort of resentment that you could say. But I would say, it's interesting. Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl. It just rolls off the tongue.
Rolls off the tongue. Go from T to S, yeah.
But it's a very different team that Notre Dame is going to be bringing in, and playing against. I mean, again, as you said, Oregon State is missing several key components. This is not remotely the same team that competed in the Pac-12 this year. So it should be interesting. I'm expecting not a very close game.
No.
I would hope that this would be a game that Notre Dame can really establish themselves and say, we had a couple blips to the end of the season, but we're still, the top 15 team that people thought we were going into the season.
At the time of recording Tuesday night, I believe it's the 5th today, the 5th Tuesday night, we don't really know who Notre Dame is going to be bringing. We know that Maris Liufau is going to be going to the NFL draft. He's going to be playing in those, I think, the East-West Bowl, but is not going to play in this game going on. Other than that, we have some assumptions. Many people are going to assume Joe Alt, Audric Estime, possibly Blake Fisher won't play in the game. On defense, maybe Cam Hart. An interesting guy who said he is going to play in the game is Xavier Watts, who just yesterday was named the top defensive player in college football, wins the Nagurski Trophy. That's kind of interesting. Kind of fun that our guy with all these interceptions is playing along probably a very rookie lineup.
Congratulations to him. That's a big honor. And it is interesting, this is just a guy who's committed to the program because he has nothing to benefit from this at all.
I think whatever happens in this game at the quarterback position, there's going to be a lot of storyline. Sam Hartman, if he's playing in this game, by all means, this should be one of the Sam Hartman's good games, his good performances. He's very much depleted at the receiver position. He's going to be throwing to some walk-ons. Maybe Matt Salerno will see some final action. Tight ends is down to the third tight end with Holden Stays transferring. But still, he should be able to, if he plays, this should be a good game for him. If Sam Hartman in the coming days decides not to play, you're probably going to see Steve Angeli and see what Steve Angeli can do in a full start against another Power 5 team. And maybe it could be another Buckner where after he throws well, he decides to go to another team in the offseason. But I think we'll see in the coming days. Hartman all along said that he or at least inferred that he planned to play in the bowl game, but in the past couple of days, we've seen some rumors, not total credibility, that might not be the case after Notre Dame announced it was heading down to Texas. We'll see there, but it should be fun at the quarterback position. But a position that I'm excited to watch for is, assuming Estime sits out, almost everybody assumes that, almost everybody assumes this man is going to go to the draft, be a second-day pick. It's a wide-open running back room, and there's really a chance for some of these talented second, third-team backs to get some action.
And I think it's really interesting, too, because I've been watching the transfer portal news. Obviously, the receiving room has been cleared out at this point. It remains to be seen. There's Chris Mitchell's coming in from FIU, so we'll see, what that position looks like next year. But from as far as I can tell, no transfers out of the running back room.
No transfers out of the running back room.
Which means that everybody believes that they're in position to, win that starting spot. So I would expect to see, and that I think is going to be the difference maker against Oregon State, is just that we have a bunch of young backs who are hungry for time and who want to establish themselves as the guy going forward.
The season in the running back room is an interesting run. Coach McCullough definitely played it, try to get everybody happy for a sense. We know that Ford, a transfer from Penn State, he can't transfer again at this time, so he's kind of stuck on Notre Dame. He didn't see much legitimate action more early on. He obviously had that big hit against him in the Tennessee State game. He saw some on special teams, but he'll be back or won't be on a college football roster, sadly, next year. I could unfortunately see maybe Notre Dame decides to move on. But beyond that, you got Payne, you got Love, and you got the guy who everybody thought would be that lead two-back at the beginning of the year, Jadarian Price. He was not necessarily that. So I don't know what you're going to see in this game, but I think all these guys, as you said, could be starters next year.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be, the bowl game honestly could tell you a lot. If somebody's not getting the minutes that they expect, I would hope that the coaching staff would use this opportunity to see, who they have, what positions they hope to improve on looking into the portal, what, areas that in the coming years they could recruit to get, again, this has been said a while, our wide receiver room has not been great historically over the last, half decade. But are there any other glaring holes in the roster that we want to improve on? And I think they're going to use the bowl game to really take stock of what guys are in the building.
One thing Notre Dame's going to see a lot of next year is change at the offensive line. We know Alt's likely off. Fisher sounds like he may be off. One of the first transfers, Zeke Carell, center for the program, sounds like sources tell NDTV and the Observer that maybe was told he might Notre Dame might not be able to guarantee him the minutes he's going to want as a veteran player. He entered the transfer portal. This game is going to see, some some players who are going to have their chance to solidify them at the offensive line. We'll see what that looks like next year. Notre Dame's offensive line generally this year, a strength. Let's talk about the wide receiver. What a mass exodus last week. We first hear Chancey Stuckey, wide receivers coach, a day after Marcus Freeman said he'd love to have his whole staff back. Program departs from Chancey Stuckey, and after that we see Tobias Merriweather gone, Rico Flores gone.
And Rico was interesting to me because he had a big role this year, and I kind of had the sense that I expected him to take a massive step next year and start to transition to, possibly be the guy here. So to see that departure, it makes you wonder, was it linked to Chancey Stuckey's decision to part ways?
Reports say they were very close. Braylon James, one of the highly rated receivers going into the year, didn't get much playing time. But, man, that kid had potential. That might be the biggest loss amongst this group. But then there's the one. Just recently on Twitter, we found out that Chris Tyree led the Irish in receiving yards, former running back, kind of a strange third down back. Converted a receiver, was not used a lot in the short game, but, man, they used him down the field. Transferring back to his home, University of Virginia. And interestingly, Notre Dame Senior Day next year, University of Virginia. I mean, you'll go there next year. I guess you're still a Chris Tyree fan.
I mean,
Brett is a University of Virginia fan on the side. I have to explain to all of our listeners.
Yeah, no. I have that game marked on my calendar. Just to talk a bit about Virginia sports. Obviously not a great season out of them, but better than, honestly, I was expecting.
Yeah.
The top 10 win against North Carolina on the road. Their first top 10 win on the road in program history. So I think Tony Elliott's building something down there.
Played JMU close.
And JMU has turned out to be quite the team.
Yeah.
I don't think, however, that game will be particularly close next year. I would hope that this would be a Notre Dame statement win.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's honestly sad to see all these guys leaving. Obviously, wish them nothing but the best.
Yeah.
I can't help but imagine that the coaching decisions behind closed doors are what led to this mass exodus.
Before we move on to who Notre Dame might be getting, got to talk a little bit about Chris Tyree. He ended the season with about 400 yards roughly, a few touchdowns, but he wasn't a star wide receiver. I don't think even at UVA he'll be a 1, maybe he'll be a 2. He was always kind of a strange player to me. He was very much like a Darren Sproles, right? You're kind of passing back, a guy who can do a lot of RPOs, cut out. Notre Dame didn't use him like that at all. They used him like a full wide receiver in the slot, go down the field. It seems like his development, they might have not had a total plan on what he can do. We'll see if maybe that can be better at Virginia. But let's take a look.
And just one thing to add at that, I think you're absolutely right. I love the comparison to Darren Sproles. I would even liken him to maybe more of a modern game, Austin Eckler, in that he's that sort of check-down passing back. And, if you look at some of the teams that we played this year and some of the defensive fronts that we were up against, it might not have been a bad idea to try Tyree in that role. But that was, something that we never did, I guess. Coaching saw it differently.
No, I mean, it was a heavy screen pass offense, heavy run offense. When they went down the field, they took a look to Mitchell Evans. He'll be coming back next year after the injury. Holden Stays announced he's transferring. Obviously, won't see more of him. Mixed performance this year. It'll be interesting to see. Notre Dame's getting some replacement on the receivers. Announced today Chris Mitchell from FIU, basketball powerhouse FIU. I think they were playing earlier against Illinois on ESPN, but Chris Mitchell comes in and a really, really good season with FIU, over 1,000 yards. I mean, he comes in, he cements himself as a really star, clear receiver. This team didn't have this year. They haven't really had in a few years, and it's going to be a very lucrative receiver for any transfer quarterback to come in and find.
And when you say transfer quarterback, there's quite a lot of in the rumor mill about who might be coming here.
There is, and another potential receiver for that transfer quarterback, Bo Collins, receiver from Clemson. Sounds like he's doing some visits. He's going to visit Notre Dame frequently. We'll see if maybe he's interested in Notre Dame as well. That would be an epic 1-2 punch in addition to everything that Notre Dame has currently. Let's talk about it. Riley Leonard from Duke, who we went to Duke. He played well in that game. Our defense, I think, struggled against him more than they struggled against other quarterbacks. Even though we held him well, they struggled. He's an option. He's been crystal balled to Notre Dame. We haven't heard anything. He's transferring. He's not going to play in Duke's kind of C-tier bowl game. Maybe there's some other options too. Kansas State's quarterback, Kyle McCord, transferring from Ohio State. Brett, if you had to pick somebody, is Riley Leonard? Let's say for now you have to pick. We're not going with the Angelique Carr game. You have to pick. Who are you picking in this portal?
I see. It's tough because you have there's a lot of movement going on, and there's still going to be a lot of movement.
There is.
So we're not exactly sure if this is it. Who knows who else might enter the portal? But I like Leonard. I like Riley Leonard. And now I would say Riley Leonard, I saw from reports, is looking at Notre Dame and Auburn.
Okay.
Because he's from the area. He's really torn between these two. He has the do not contact tag on, so he has to initiate contact first, and he's contacted both Notre Dame and Auburn. I like Riley Leonard. I think it's tough to judge him based on the system that he was in. Obviously, Mike Elko did a great job with Duke. He, had one good season and then immediately left for the big money in the SEC at A&M. But I think it's hard to judge in this situation because I would say, again, to liken it to the situation with Sam Hartman, and that Sam Hartman was never around that much talent, nor was he ever under as much scrutiny as he was until he came here. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's the similar situation with Leonard in that you're coming from Duke. Duke's they're not a football powerhouse. Yeah. So, it should be interesting. I would prefer Leonard in this draft, though, just because I think of the way he likes to make plays with his legs, but he's also, I think he'd be a very good fit in the pro-style offense.
Take a look at what Leonard did this year. He was able to beat Clemson, a game that I believe was at home. Clemson, good, not great defense. Their defense was the best part of that team. Notre Dame saw it. They really beat Sam Hartman on that day. He played Notre Dame well, but not great enough to win. And he played okay before he got injured against Florida State at Florida State. But Florida State's defense also, kind of ate up Louisville this weekend. So I don't know what the comparison is there. They haven't seen as much injury in the defensive side. I think he has a lot of upside. I think he's a talented kid. I think Notre Dame, if they can get him, it's going to be as much success as possible, right? But, it is a question. I think all the transfers really in this portal right now are very much question marks. Even Kyle McCord, he didn't play well when the pressure was on the most in the season's biggest game that they knew they had to win to make the college football playoff. He didn't play like he had to. The play calling was probably fine. You can't blame that one on Day. So I don't know. We'll have to see. I think he's not a savior quarterback. He's not a Jaden Daniels is coming back, a Bo Nix is coming back kind of quarterback. But, we'll have to see. And I think if Notre Dame can get him, he comes in as the clear favorite to start. CJ Carr watches. Steve Angeli transfers out. Kenny McNeil probably also transfers out because they got this 3-star kid from Nebraska coming on as a preferred walk-on. You probably put in the 3 slot. Then you can, find something, but we'll have to see. It's going to be interesting.
And I think it's interesting to look to the transfer portal. Obviously, CJ Carr, as a program, you're banking on him being the next guy, right? And you don't want to put him in as a true freshman. I'm not, sure if Angeli has shown us enough yet. Obviously, this bowl game could be the deciding factor. Who knows if Angeli comes in and lights it up? Maybe then, we don't look for a transfer quarterback. Yep. But with the recruits you have coming in, I like the idea of having guys sit for a year or two, redshirting, and then, developing in the program before they're thrown out there.
That's an interesting thought, because I was thinking this week and talking to our good friend JJ Post, and him and I are both in basic agreement that your high school recruits are going to probably stop coming to top programs, right? Because it's this impatience. I have to play immediately. I'm not going to develop. I think we're going to start to see more recruits going to mid-major schools, going to schools outside of the Power 5 where they can play immediately. Imagine a kid like CJ Carr. He knows that he's going to go to San Diego State and play immediately. He's going to play in the Mountain West. He's going to play immediately and start. If he plays well, he can transfer and pick wherever he wants to go. And then he knows that he's going to start there. I wonder if that's going to be the model, where it's almost like a minor league system instead of the NFL theory, where it's like the Mahomes. You wait a year. Jordan Love, I don't know how many years he waited before, showing out pretty decently this year, and then finally getting some time on the actual field.
I think that's an interesting idea. You just have to see, sort of the development. How ready are you to come in and compete? Because it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, if you go in and you're able to succeed at a mid-major school, then now you've opened yourself up to go to other places. You could go back into the Power 5. Maybe you could compete for a starting job at an SEC powerhouse. But if you go to this mid-major school and you flop, you've closed every door that you
totally have. You totally
Whereas
have.
if you sit at Notre Dame for a year, you don't do great there, you could still end up in the Power 5 for sure. Somebody will pick you up.
But I don't think you're guaranteed a starting spot.
No, but if you flop at a mid-major, you're done.
It's interesting for sure. I personally think right now we're giving too much benefit of the doubt to high schoolers, especially high schoolers who come from weaker football leagues. I mean, CJ Carr, I'm high on him. I've watched hours of CJ Carr film. Pretty much anything that's out there I've watched. But the guy is playing in, Michigan competition. It is not one of the better leagues nationally. You see some of the offensive line. His own offensive line is atrocious. Some of the defensive lines he's playing against and cornerbacks are just unathletic, right? You're just playing against a random kid from school down the street. He can make a move there. It's difficult for me, as much as I'm impressed with CJ Carr, as much as I'm impressed with his footwork, his IQ, his knowledge, to know if that's going to transfer over to the pro game where he's playing against the best of the best.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, it's the trickle-down idea. So if you're a star high school player, you get to college, everybody's a star high school player. You get to the NFL, everybody's a star college player.
Yeah.
It just gets more and more competitive as you go up. And it's hard to judge where on this mountain recruits coming out of high school are.
Outside of Notre Dame passing game, we got one major hire. Mike Brown, turning as the new wide receivers coach, comes from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is kind of ironic, given the run association you typically have with Wisconsin. Fickell's changing that a little bit. Really, though, this program is becoming Luke Fickell's disciple, Cincinnati's disciples, Freeman, a Cincinnati disciple, Gino Jadugli, who's the passing game coordinator. He actually went to Wisconsin this offseason and then decided, no, I'm going to go be the quarterback's coach / help with the passing game at Notre Dame. Mike Brown's coming in here. So even if Jared Parker's coming back next year, I think it will be a team environment, a Cincinnati-heavy environment. And I don't know if what we saw last year is going to be what we see again. It'll be very interesting. We'll talk a little bit more about Notre Dame football and how it applies to the future of Notre Dame. But we're talking college football playoff. We're talking the controversy. We're talking 4 teams. Turn 12 teams. Are these good games to watch? And Florida State, they're coming here next year, and they're going to be angry. They're going to want to win everything. We got more on that after a few words from our friends at Amazon. You're listening to the ShamTalk podcast.
You're listening to the ShamTalk podcast, the #1 Notre Dame athletics podcast in the world. We appreciate your support, and we're constantly looking for ways to improve the listener experience. In order to do that, we need your help. We have a pretty cool relationship with Amazon.com, and we'd like to invite you to join us. Amazon recently sent us a special link. When you use this link to buy something from Amazon, we receive a small percentage of the order. Best of all, it costs nothing extra for you. The link is available on the screen and in the description below. Once again, before you head to Amazon, start with our link. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and it helps us provide you with the best possible listener experience. Thanks for your support, and let's send it back to the guys.
And welcome back. Always grateful to our friends at Amazon. As a reminder, costs nothing extra for you. Well, maybe it costs you 5 seconds of time. That's about it. Just click the link and we receive a small portion of every purchase. We're always extremely grateful, and it really helps the listener experience. Some clearer mics helps us go to more places, bring on some more cool people. Much appreciated. Welcoming Brett back here. College football playoff got announced. Michigan, Washington, Texas, Alabama. Let's just go immediately. Was it right to leave Florida State at number 5?
See, now that's a loaded question.
Is it?
And I think there's many different ways you can look about it. The committee is going to say at the end of the day, we're looking for the 4 best teams.
Yeah.
That's what they want. Now, historically, is that what they've always done? No. But this year, they were adamant on going for the 4 best teams. And I think, judging the body of work the last couple of weeks and just the impressive win that Alabama had against Georgia, I think you have to give them the nod.
I completely agree. Dan Orlovsky got some heat on ESPN when he said this Florida State team did not go undefeated. And I completely agree with him. the team led by Jordan Travis went undefeated. And even when they were undefeated, you and I have been talking all season, go back some episodes, they look like frauds. They barely beat Clemson. They look strong in the opener against LSU, but that's an opener. I think, it was a strange team they were able to go undefeated. They got by Florida in the swamp. They got by a terrible Louisville team in the ACC championship, but they weren't a strong team. They're going to get blown out by Georgia, I believe, in the Peach, I want to say, whatever bowl they're in. Orange, thank you. They're going to get blown up by Georgia in the Orange. They would get killed by a Michigan team. For me, it's completely the right decision, as I think that we have to understand, and I think this is becoming more clear in sports as a whole, that all of sports is about entertainment. The reason we play sports is for money, but really it's because money is driven by fan interest. That's the reason. Sports is not about fairness. It's not about equality. And I think it's important to competition, but it's not the ultimate goal. Call me crazy. Competition and complete, utter fairness is not the ultimate goal. What I want to see as a fan is I want to see two great games. And typically, what have we seen in the playoff? We've seen that at least one of the semifinal games is terrible game blowout. I am so excited, Brett, for these games. These are going to be great games. Washington, Texas. I mean, look at those teams, how they played in their respective conference championship games. Alabama coming off that big win versus a Michigan team who, they were slow to start against Iowa, but they've looked consistent overall. Florida State is not in the best teams there. And I have one other point before I bring it back, but look, the same thing for NBA. The NBA is going to the same model, entertainment only. The in-season tournament that's on right now is the stupidest thing ever, right? There's no reason for players to want to play it. They get $500,000. These are millionaires. $500,000 means nothing to them. It takes up time. They have to fly to Vegas. Winning the games means nothing. It's a whole marketing scheme. Fans love it. They're selling tickets. The ratings for these games are off the charts. They have the special courts. People love it because it's all about the fans. And I think the college football playoff did a correct service to the fans here by selecting 4 teams who are going to make for interesting games, interesting competition, even if that means that an unbeaten Florida State team isn't there.
I think there's some validity to what you said in that, yes, obviously they're trying to make the best matchups. I mean, you could see Michigan's reaction to finding out that they're playing Alabama. It was a collective moment in that ballroom at, I think it was their facility that they were in. Or was it they were in Indianapolis?
I don't know. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. But you could see that they were expecting to play Florida State and were disappointed to find out that they were playing Alabama. Now, I think going back to look at these teams as are they all elite, the problem is this year there hasn't been this is the best team in the country. Plain simply, I don't even think Michigan is deserving of the 1 spot. I would flip Washington over.
I agree.
That.
You and I agree with that.
I can get. I'll talk about that in a bit, but. The reason why we've been seeing blowouts in the past is because there's consistently been 1 or 2 teams that are leagues above everybody else. Last year was Georgia. Ohio State played them close.
Yep.
Still fell short. The year before that, Georgia again. The year before that, nobody was beating that Alabama team. Nobody came close to beating that Alabama team. And then you had LSU. Nobody came clse to beating that LSU team. Right? And it's just... This year, I think now with the NIL and the transfer portal, we're getting more parity in the sport.
I was going to say, I think it really is NIL helping. I mean, these teams didn't rely. Penix, you could say, is the big transfer portal guy here. But yeah, no,
Jordan Travis was a transfer portal.
You're right. Jordan Travis is a transfer portal. But sorry, keep going.
But yeah, no, you can see that there's more parity, and I think these games are going to be more interesting. That being said, though, I just find the committee's reasoning to be appalling. I have a lot of problems with the way that they went about leaving them out. First and foremost, you have Florida State at 4 going into Selection Sunday. You kept them at 4. So they were in the playoff and they won.
Yeah.
They did everything that was asked of them, and you moved them back 1 spot. But you say they're not one of the top 4 teams. They're not elite in your mind. Yet Georgia, who was your number 1, somehow drops behind Florida State. That doesn't really make sense. Either you think Florida State is not better than Alabama or Georgia, or you just think Florida State is, a top 4 team. I don't really understand the seeding of which they came up with at the end.
I don't understand the 5-6 seeding as well. I'll agree with you on that. I would disagree that Florida State did everything that was asked of them, because I think they struggled against, their defense did great, giving credit to their defense. They struggled against a terrible Louisville team. And the precedent here is 2014 Ohio State. Cardale Jones comes in and they kill kill Wisconsin. I believe is like 58-0 in that 2014 Big Ten championship game. Yeah, this guy who doesn't come here to play school, this clown of a quarterback sees action after JT Barrett goes down, Braxton Miller way out, and they just kill a good Wisconsin team. That I think is a little bit different than, a Florida State team that is unbeaten, and it's a different situation. And I think it's a hard decision. I think the committee, in my eyes, made the tough right decision. There'd be outcry wherever. I mean, DeSantis, Rick Scott are saying they want to sue now. I think there'd be, if the same thing would happen to Alabama, Saban, there would be 3 years no playoff. But let's talk about what this means for the ACC. It's a conference that has low TV contracts comparatively. It is a conference that we've already seen a lot of people are angry about. They're upset about. Clemson maybe rumbling about leaving. Florida State the same. They've maybe talked with North Carolina. Next year they're adding SMU, Stanford, Cal. Notre Dame's in as a half member for Olympic sports. I think a lot of the reason they didn't receive respect from the committee is you didn't play anybody, right?
And this is the big problem of mine.
Yep.
To me, sure, you can say that the committee got it right this year, and I think my opinion on this is, yes, Alabama is just a better team than Florida State right now. I would put head-to-head, I think Alabama wins that game.
Of course.
So for the season, you got it right. But in the long term, you have screwed everything up. Oh. Everything is screwed up. And here's why. Florida State went 2-0 against teams in the SEC, right? We herald the SEC as this great conference. It is the best, the premier in college football.
Yep.
When, quite frankly, this year, it wasn't.
No.
It was a down year for the SEC. In fact, the ACC, the conference that everyone will say was weak, that Florida State manhandled because nobody played in it, had a winning record against the SEC.
Sure, but look how some of those ACC teams that were heralded at the start of the year, like Duke and Louisville, season ended.
Duke had horrific injuries. Duke is missing so many key players towards the end of their season. I don't think you can say that this is the same Duke team.
Yeah, but they got beat by a bad Notre Dame team. At home.
By one score. By one score. And when we saw that game, I was shocked that Notre Dame pulled that out.
Yeah.
And then you talk about Louisville. Louisville the next week hands Notre Dame their worst loss of the season.
Absolutely.
And that game wasn't close.
No.
Right? And so when we go back to, just how weak is the ACC, you've basically sent a message to all other conferences that if you are not the Big Ten, which, don't get me started on the Big Ten.
Sure.
I think it is an incredibly overrated conference.
Yeah.
There are only 3 competitive teams, one of which, Penn State, hasn't actually done anything to warrant a top 10 ranking other than beating up on bad teams, right? The 2 big challenges they had, they flopped miserably against. We'll have to see how they do against Ole Miss in their New Year's Six game, but remains to be seen. If you're not in the Big Ten or you're not in the SEC, you don't matter. And that's the message that the committee sent. Because when you look at it, Michigan is the 1 seed.
Yeah.
Washington has the most ranked wins in college football. Mm-hmm. Washington is undefeated.
Yep.
Washington beat, do they have 3 top 10 wins? Because they beat Oregon twice.
Oregon twice, and I don't think there's a third in there. I mean, Oregon State was 12 at one point.
USC was 10 at one point.
Yeah, but those don't count.
UCLA, right? So you beat Oregon twice.
Yep.
At one point, the conference championship game, you were an underdog by 9 points.
10.5, yeah.
10.5.
Yeah.
At one point, you were up 20-3.
Yeah.
Washington, to me, has been just dismissed the entirety of the season. But my point is, when you look at the selections and the choices that the committee made, they were never going to leave out an SEC team. And I have a couple scenarios to propose to you in a second, just to show how ridiculous this bias is, that, in my opinion, towards the SEC and the Big Ten. And, of course, all the teams in the playoff next year will be in either the SEC or the Big Ten. So if you're Florida State, if you're Clemson, if you're North Carolina, if you're anybody who believes that they have a shot at competing for a national title, if you're not in one of those 2 conferences or Notre Dame, you're not going to get in.
I think the best argument, I love Washington. I'll say that. I love Washington. I think they're a good program. I love watching Penix. I think their defense showed out pretty decently against Oregon. They've been very volatile. Lots of huge penalty defense, pass interference in their corners. I think the best argument on Washington is that they had 2 games where they really struggled at home. I'm looking at it right now. They struggled at home against Washington State in the Apple Cup, beat them by a field goal that Penix was, his head in the headsets there. They barely beat a bad Arizona State team by 8 points at home. So they played their opponents really close, and they played in a bunch of one-score games. In the non-conference, they didn't really play anybody. I mean, they played Boise State and Michigan State. I mean, I guess you could say Boise's a decent team, but it's a team that they took care of business when they needed to. I think they are gonna go in against Texas. That's a close game, -2 Texas when I looked last time, but I really think it's anybody's game. Very, very, very excited for that one. I also feel bad for them because I believe it's the Sugar Bowl. Of course, the Sugar Bowl is Texas right there. It's terrible, and Michigan is going to the Rose Bowl. It makes no sense.
No, are they in Texas or are they in
or it's in New Orleans?
I think it's New Orleans, yeah.
Well, it's New Orleans, but I mean, that's a 5-hour drive.
Exactly.
Yeah, Houston.
It's frustrating to me in that, Alabama struggled against teams. There was the University of Southern Florida?
Yeah.
What was it, 13-3, 16-3 was that final score?
Yeah.
It's a group of 5 opponent.
That's terrible. It was a away game. I'll give them that. But come on, man. You went through 3 quarterbacks in that game. Our friend, future Notre Dame lacrosse player, Tyler Buckner, played in that game.
And are we gonna gloss over, and I may get some heat for this, the Iron Bowl. I don't care that it's a rivalry game.
Yeah.
If your rival is 6-6, you have a playoff spot on the line. It takes a 4th and 31, a Herculean effort out of Jalen Milroe to leave the Iron Bowl with a win.
I'm convinced that a lot of the reason they received the praise they did from the committee was how Milroe played in that situation, that bullet pass to the corner of the end zone. And I think that's deserved. But no, I mean, I agree. How do you play that and you play Georgia in a neutral site the week after? It's crazy. I mean, Georgia didn't play their best game. A couple of own mistakes that weren't Alabama's fault, right? A couple dumb fumbles. But no, I agree. I think it's a
and even then it was
strange.
A win by 3.
Yeah.
And so, in my mind, I think that what the committee did by leaving out Florida State, you sent that message that if you're not in the SEC or the Big Ten, you don't matter. And because I'd like to put together just a couple of scenarios to get your thoughts going. So, the main reason why the committee said, no Florida State was the injury to Jordan Travis. If Jalen Milroe goes down in the SEC championship and Alabama beats Georgia, but Jalen Milroe's gone, do they still make it in?
No.
You don't think they do?
No.
So they're leaving out the SEC champion?
Yeah, I think they would go with Travis in that situation.
I don't
go with Florida State. You go with the guy who they've done it all year without him.
I see. That's the thing.
They won a few games.
I don't think they would. And this is, you can call me a conspiracy theorist for this. I'm fine with that. I think if Georgia beats Alabama, your playoffs are Georgia, Michigan, Washington, and Florida State.
Of course.
I don't think Texas makes it in.
No,
I think the only reason Texas made it in was because Alabama had to get in. And there was no way that the committee could veil putting in Alabama over Texas when Texas beat them by 10 in Tuscaloosa.
They were a package deal. They were definitely package deal.
If Texas could get in without Alabama, but Alabama could not get in without Texas.
And your second point?
And so that's what I would say my first scenario. I guess my second scenario would have been that exactly. What would have happened if Texas wins and Georgia wins?
We'll see in a second. But breaking news from Notre Dame, Father Bob Dowd named the next president. Our Sam Kaufman has more.
Good afternoon, Notre Dame. Today, the university's Board of Trustees announced Father Robert A. Dowd, CSC, as the next president of the University of Notre Dame. Father Dowd currently serves as vice president and the associate provost for interdisciplinary initiatives. Additionally, he is an associate professor of political science and the religious superior of the Holy Cross community here at Notre Dame. He is also a fellow and trustee of the university. Ordained in 1994, Dowd later received his master's and PhD in political science from UCLA. Around campus, Dowd is known as a deeply pastoral man as well as an academic. He lives and serves as priest in residence in Kavanaugh Hall. And Dowd is known to be an advocate for communities in East Africa. Each year, he goes to St. Monica to conduct a mission appeal for the Holy Cross Mission in Nairobi. Dowd regularly presides over the Friday morning daily Mass at the Basilica of the Sacred Heart. When it was announced earlier this semester that Father Jenkins will step down as university president, it wasn't the only change in university leadership this year. Earlier this semester, it was announced that Jack Brennan, retired chairman of KPMG International, will take over as the Board of Trustees chair. Chairman Brennan, in a video released on the university's social media accounts, said that we're thrilled that Father Dowd will be our next leader, and we know he will be a very worthy and wonderful successor to Father John Jenkins, who leads our university so effectively and has for 2 decades. High praise from the chair. We will continue to bring you updates to this change in university leadership as we can. For NDTV, I'm Sam Kaufman, and as always, go Irish.
Welcome back. Thank you, Sam. To our live listeners, there you go. New president. I was predicting it for a while, Father Bob Dowd. We'll see what that means for Notre Dame, what it means for Notre Dame athletics and Texas.
Yeah, so back to what I was saying about Texas. It just goes to the fact that I think the committee has a strong SEC bias. It's been known for a while. In fact, they've been on record saying, you know, if we were to have a playoff without an SEC team, it wouldn't feel right. How would that work?
Okay.
So my thing is, it's unfortunate for Florida State, but there was a precedent set already that this could happen given the results in the SEC championship.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't have much there, but I think one other thing to talk about that's a little bit interesting to me is that the committee went with Liberty for the Group of 5 pick. Tulane lost, SMU won in the American. They won with Liberty out of CUSA. They're an unbeaten team, but they have not played anybody of decency this year. They won a home game in the CUSA championship, so they're going to take on Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl. I think Oregon is favored by -20, and that's without Bo Nix. So it's just a terrible game there. I think the Fiesta Bowl is just going to go down from here after that Notre Dame OK State game. I mean, how can you get back to that? But what does this mean? What does the playoff? They're moving to 12 next year, but ACC getting left out. Brett, Notre Dame is playing 5 or 6 games against ACC teams for the future. 6 some years when they play Wake. Is this really alarming and bad for Notre Dame?
Like I said before, I would say what the committee did in picking the 4 teams that they did for this year, they got it right for the year, but long term I think it's only going to be detrimental because we are going to get 2 super conferences. It wouldn't surprise me that Monday yesterday, after finding out that they weren't in the college football playoff, did Florida State's athletic department meet with their attorneys and say, how are we going to get out of the ACC? Because obviously it's not respected. We say Power 5 conference, but in reality it's only Power 2.
I'm wondering if you could see something like Florida State leaves, and the problem here is that if they leave, they're not part of this new media deal. They can't buy it out. They can't just leave. ESPN, who has the rights to SEC2, would have their rights to ACC football, but they would not be paying Florida State SEC prices, right? That's millions and millions, I believe, like at least a $20 million a year difference. So that's a big deal for Florida State. It'll be interesting to see if they can get out of it. I think for Notre Dame, I continue to say that for all season long, I've been skeptical of Notre Dame's chances. After our last Ohio State, people are saying, oh, that's fine. We got this one-loss team. They can make it in. The one-loss Notre Dame, no chance would make it in. No chance. I've been saying all along, and I continue to defend it, that an undefeated Notre Dame team would be left out of this college football playoff. Because the conference championship game matters. And how can you not reward Texas for winning that game? How can you not reward Alabama, another one-loss team, for winning that game? An Alabama team with a win against Georgia is a stronger team, a stronger resume, than a Notre Dame team with its best wins against Ohio State and I don't even know what the second best team would be. North Carolina State, maybe? Louisville?
Honestly, yeah.
North Carolina State?
And at first I was kind of confident that was what was going to happen. And again, I thought an undefeated Notre Dame team would have gotten in. But I also thought, I thought Oregon and Washington would split. So there you would have one-loss teams. And a one-loss Power 5 champion, I think, doesn't get in over a undefeated Notre Dame team unless you're Texas, who beat the SEC champion, or the SEC champion.
Yep.
Because let's be real here, the committee's not going to leave out an SEC team.
No.
What I think would have happened, though, I just think an undefeated Notre Dame team wouldn't make it in this year. Would they have gotten a New Year's Six bowl?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
I would say
they would have gotten New Year's Six.
Even with one loss. And I think that's kind of an interesting point here is that, maybe Notre Dame is not in contention to ever get one of these top 4 seeds.
Yeah, they're going to have to rewrite the deal there. Originally, it was going to be the conference champions. Notre Dame would never be eligible to get a bye, right? Just in how the deal was written, Notre Dame would always have to play that initial round game. There's been some possible modifications, with the loss of the PAC. Is it really just going to be the top 4 conferences? Is the ACC going to be guaranteed a top 4 seed? Is it just going to be the top 4 teams? So we don't know. Nobody knows. But, I don't know what it's going to look like.
Yeah, and I would think that, and maybe Notre Dame has been looking at this differently than the way that we have. Maybe they've been looking at it in a revenue standpoint, in the fact that they just signed this massive TV deal. They will get the rights to broadcast the first round home game.
Not necessarily.
And now all of
this
this
not true.
Not guaranteed yet, really.
No, it'll probably be ESPN or Fox. It sounds like they're going to get the new deal, and they'll be able to.
Oh, because the deal is with the college football playoff.
Yeah,
it's not with.
Yeah.
Either way, it's an extra game. It's more money.
Oh, it's totally an extra game. Yeah. Ticket sales for that out of the roof. Students probably won't be here, so you'll be able to fill the student section with alums.
Exactly. And so my thinking is, there's still a path for the playoffs. Obviously, Notre Dame is going to remain independent unless it's financially, it's no longer financially possible, or there's no path to the playoffs.
Yeah.
And it seems very obvious that this is not something that the College Football Playoff Committee is going to impose. It seems not only financially feasible now with the new deal with NBC, but also just with the new playoff format, there's potential to make it almost every year.
So Notre Dame very much controls its own destiny. If they're undefeated, any year they will always make it in the playoff, guaranteed. Guaranteed. With top 12 teams, really top 11 because there's a group of 5 in there, guaranteed. They'll make it, guaranteed. One loss becomes a lot harder. Notre Dame's schedule next year sucks. They play Texas A&M on the road. They play USC on the road. They have Louisville and Florida State, Purdue. There's no guarantee that any of those teams are going to be good. All of those teams, friends, all of those teams could be unranked. There's no guarantee.
I could see us playing 0 ranked teams next year.
0 ranked teams.
A&M will be a preseason ranking because, it's the SEC.
If they have mass transfers.
I think Elko is going to work something. I think you'll see A&M is not going to be top 5. I wouldn't surprise me if they were like 18 or something like that.
Yeah.
Because, again, the SEC bias. Said it, I'll say it again.
No, it's fair.
But Florida State is going to be a shell of itself.
Yep.
Though I think Norvell, Mike Norvell's a great coach.
Yeah.
But, the turnover that roster is going to have is going to make it hard to compete. That being said, I think that they're still going to be a good team. They may not be, top 5, but I think they'll still be top 25.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, too. You take a look at where Notre Dame's schedule's head in the future. Clemson, I don't think they see Clemson for another 4 or 5 years, right? It's going to be less frequent. We had strange frequency 3 times in 4 years. We don't have opponents. We have Texas A&M home and home for a couple of years. Arkansas home and home. Arkansas was terrible this year, worst team in the SEC. They have Michigan State in a few years. They have Power 5 teams, but really Notre Dame might be kind of getting back to this Mickey Mouse schedule, right? Where we criticize 2012 BCS. You didn't play anybody. No, we didn't play anybody, and Alabama told us that. In the next few years, I really think the bar is going to be high for Notre Dame, and they're really going to have to prove themselves.
I think the whole out-of-conference scheduling, I wouldn't read too much into it. I mean, the ACC might not be a conference by the end of next year.
Sure, but I think those lower-tier ACC teams would still play you. Notre Dame needs games.
They would, for sure they would play, but if there's no regulatory body, I could for sure see the SEC swallowing up some, the Big Ten maybe grabbing 2, and the Big 12 looking to come and get the rest of them.
Yeah.
Because, again, like I said, I want to go back to this point. The selection committee has made it very much known that if you're not in the Big Ten or you're not in the SEC, you're not as important, you're not as impressive, regardless of what happens on the field, regardless if you're 13-0. And I don't want to, beat a dead horse and go back to the playoffs.
Yeah.
But that is my biggest qualm with the sport.
So you have to be in a super conference?
Not even that you have to be in a super conference, of how subjective it is. Football is not a subjective game.
Okay.
It's a numbers game. At the end of the day, there's one stat that matters, and that's wins and losses. For some reason, in college football, we decide that 13 people sitting in a room, athletic departments, former coaches, can just decide just by looking at teams, this team would beat that team, this team would be that team.
Okay.
And I don't understand that. It works in March Madness when you have 64 teams.
Sure.
But when you only have 4, you can make a lot of mistakes with that. And I think we've seen that in the past.
So there's two routes you can go, right? The first route is going to be you just really, you impose an NFL-like structure, right? You have standings and you have a very clear route to the playoff. You need to make this. Or you go back to the computer. My friend, did you see the BCS rankings? If BCS were to still be a thing, how they were to rank the teams?
I did not. What do they have?
Let's take a look. The BCS rankings. Number one, Michigan. Number 2, Washington.
Okay.
Number 3, Alabama. And number 4, Florida State. So if we were going by the computer, we would have got this ending that none of us thought was acceptable. You can't put Alabama there and then Florida State under. But that's, I mean, if we're in the computer era, that's what we would have seen. Is that perfect either? No. So I don't know what the solution is. But my take, as we wrap up our time here today, very grateful that everybody stayed with us, is this 14 playoff is unideal, and it's awesome. The drama that comes with this, the fact that we got 2, that we're going to have 3 really good games with the semifinals and the championships.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. They should be good games that are looking like good games. The lines are close. That we don't have to wait for, several rounds to get the matchups we want like next year, right? Next year is going to be 4 rounds to this. First round's not going to be anything special. It'll be fun if your team is in it, but I don't think it'll be a must-watch. It's awesome to me.
No.
I love it. I think it makes regular season really important where you can't lose. It makes conference championship really important. I think it's a big loss. I think it was a great way to go out. And I could see, maybe if something happens, and I think college football is going to walk back a lot of the new ideas, new things like NIL and transfer, expansion, realignment. I think some of those are going to get walked back. I think it was fun, and I think it was a great way to go out. I might be in the minority here.
I think it's certainly interesting. Obviously, when the other big college sport that you can look at would be basketball, and you can't do in college football what you can do in college basketball. It wouldn't work because unfortunately these upsets, they don't happen as often as they do in March.
Well, and you require rest, right? So you'd
need rest. Yeah, the 64-team tournament would take you the entire season. At that point, there might as well not be a regular season. But I'm very happy that we're expanding out of the 14 playoff.
Interesting.
I'm very happy because, and the other thing people say is, and they'll talk about the selection going in as the 14 playoff it's we don't get as many blowouts as we might with the 16 playoff. There's been a blowout every playoff since this has started. Every single one, somebody has blown somebody out. So why we're worried about with the 14 playoff we can prevent blowouts? It hasn't worked. No. It has not worked thus far. I don't know what hope we have to make it continue to work.
This year is a magical year. I don't have many explanations for that. I think it was a flawed system, but I think there's a beauty in it that we're seeing this year, and maybe we're seeing it too late. We didn't see that with Notre Dame, unfortunately. Maybe, I don't know. Do you call the 2 Notre Dame games both blowouts?
Oh, the ones that we played in the playoffs?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Against Clemson, that was a blowout, and then most recently against Alabama, we were outclassed in every phase of the game at that point. Offense, defense, special teams. It was like a high school varsity team scrimmaging a JV team. It was tough to watch.
Until then, we'll have to see what Notre Dame looks like. Next year, we have a glorified scrimmage to look forward to. El Paso, December 29th. CBS televising a Notre Dame game. Pretty rare. Should be fun for all of us to watch. Wishing all of our listeners, all of our viewers, very happy holidays and Merry Christmas to those celebrating. Thank you for supporting NDTV. Thank you for supporting The Observer. We very much appreciate it. We'll bring you continued coverage in all our platforms as we lead into the bowl game and the off season. Brett and I will be back sometime after the bowl game to discuss all of Notre Dame athletics.
Basketball and hockey.
The off season and everything else. But for us, it's been a pleasure this football season. Have a great, great bowl season, and go Irish.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. To stay up to date with ShamTalk and get all our behind-the-scenes content, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Notre Dame Television. That's all for now. Thanks for listening, and go Irish!